Hey everybody, it's me, Greg, and guess what? I am up for Most Entertaining Online Personality at the South by Southwest Gaming Awards, and it would mean the world to me if you went and voted for me. Of course, every time we win one of these things, it's a win for Kinda Funny, and it's a win for you because we get to go there and be like, hey, people who've never heard of us, guess what? People like us, and everybody goes, who are you? And they go, maybe I want to be a best friend, or they're jerks, and they say, we'll stay away from everybody. So if you go to kindafunny.com, SXSW, and vote Greg Miller for Most Entertaining Online Personality, I would take it as a personal favor that I will never, ever be able to repay you for. Colin,
Yes.
what's your topic?
Let me take you on a walk.
Oh, yeah.
Take my phone
It's
out.
going to be another juicy topic, isn't it? The last one was 45 minutes.
So, the caucus happened, the Iowa caucus happened. And really, before any of this happened, we're hearing a lot about the word socialism, right? And what I'm realizing, first of all, no one was talking about socialism in this way, maybe since before World War II in the United States with the labor movement, all that kind of stuff. But really, we're hearing this word a lot again, right? It's not an American really tradition, but there's always been socialist elements and communist elements in the United States. And that's fine. That's your right to be a socialist or a communist. I'm not calling socialist communist, by the way. But I saw this image going around today. It was on this hashtag socialism checklist. And this is because, basically there was a virtual tie in Iowa, and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton both walked away with, delegates, and they're going to go to New Hampshire. I'm sure Bernie Sanders will win there, and then we'll see what happens in the South. And there's these kinds of Bernie Sanders images going on around right now about supporting socialism. And they drive me fucking insane. Okay? Insane. So I wanted to talk about this image and then talk about the definition of socialism and then get because I don't really actually know how you guys feel about the idea of socialism. And people know how I feel, so I don't want to get too deep into it. Right. But here's what the image says. And this,
let's unpack this because I have a bunch of questions for you on this topic.
Yeah. And this is what there's a lot of, you've probably seen these images on Facebook, on Twitter. There's a lot of different kinds. And it's the people are posting, it says Socialist Programs in the U.S. with Uncle Sam pointing like this.
Right.
Okay. And it says the Department of Agriculture, Amber Alerts, Amtrak, public beaches, public busing services, business subsidies, the Census Bureau, it goes on and on, the CIA, the Department of Energy, FEMA, the IRS, and then they get into things that are Social Security, are socialist, Medicare, Medicaid. The National Weather Service, prisons and jails, the sewer systems, the United States Postal Service, the White House is one of them. Like, what is that? And this infuriated me because I wrote on Twitter, I spot about 6 things on here that are actually socialist. So things like...
You mean NASA is not a socialist
organization? No, it's not. Snow removal, not a socialist thing.
Sure.
And so I wanted to talk about this particular idea that of new socialism in the United States or just generally where the government spends money and therefore it's socialist.
Right.
Wait, what is the point of this image?
What is this? The image is to say, look at all the things socialism does in the United States,
right?
And we already are socialists.
But I mean, who's posting this, and what's the slant?
What camp is that coming?
It's mostly from Sanders or Sanders supporters.
Yeah,
okay,
this is
so it's not a knock against socialism.
Exactly. It's trying to diffuse the argument when people say, I'll never vote for him, he's a socialist. The argument would be, but all these, but all these programs are socialist.
Right, exactly. Thank you for explaining that much more eloquently than I did.
Before we get into that, I think that the concern I always see, and at least the one that I had to actually go look up, and I totally forgot the two definitions now, is that a lot of people mix up socialism with communism. And communism obviously has such a negative stigma.
Of course, as it
because
should.
of our history.
It's a disaster.
Right. That people automatically think, oh, he's a socialist. That means he's, our entire economy is going to crumble because it's exactly like communism.
Right.
But the two are different.
They are different.
Socialism,
the tenets of socialism come from communism.
Right.
Undeniably, unequivocally, historically, intellectually, 100%. No arguing that.
Right.
The idea that the government spends money on something and therefore it is socialist is fucking absurd. And it's this idea. The Romans had a military. The Romans had roads and aqueducts. The Romans had public entertainment at the Colosseum that was paid for by the government 2,000 years ago. Were the Romans socialists?
Right,
That's
so-
an absurd note. You know, like
So
were the
where's-
Visigoths socialists because they had a military? The fucking Mongols.
So where's the threshold?
I want to time out and read your definition of
So
socialism.
this is what
Bring everybody up
this
to
is what
speed.
socialism actually means, and this
Okay.
is why we have to have definitions of words. You can't just walk around and call yourself socialism or say socialism is something. This is what socialism actually means, and you're not allowed to have your own opinion, like your own definition of it. It's just not the way it works. It's a noun. A political and economic theory of social organization that advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. So it is a spin-off of the idea of communism, where each according to his means, each according to his ability, kind of thing. Where it was basically like you're going to do what you can and you're going to get what you need, and that's it. So this is like a few steps away from that, basically.
Right.
Saying that the people or the government control the means of production, which isn't a reality in the United States or in most socialist countries in the world.
Is or is not?
It is not. I mean, the means of
But there are certain European countries that are quote unquote socialist.
yeah, there's a lot of them that practice tenets of socialism.
Right.
And that's where I kind of come in, where we do have pieces of socialism. Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and disability insurance and welfare. These are all socialist programs.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. But just because the government spends money on something doesn't make it socialist. And so I wanted to dispel this notion, first of all, that socialism, that's not socialism. That's really not a very smart thing to say.
Well, then what is it?
Socialism is the idea.
No, not socialism. What is what they're saying?
These things are more like part of the social contract. It's part of the functions of a government. You know what I mean? Like,
right. That's the whole point of having a government.
right. Like the government collects taxes. The opposite of, like it's not to say that there's like these polar opposites of, well, without any government, there's no government. Obviously, there's anarchy. I mean, that's true. But just because the government works on behalf of its people or does something for its people, whether it builds a road or it has a military to protect it or whatever, that's not socialist. That's a government.
But the problem,
You know what I mean?
the problem comes in because when you look at socialist countries, those are functions of the government.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I really wanted to get down into the nitty
Right.
gritty with you guys. Because I don't want to talk too much. I mean, people can hear. I mean, especially on our Facebook group with our good friends there, or whatever. I talk about it a lot, and I talk about it on Twitter. That along with 50% of Americans, according to Gallup, unequivocally would never vote for a socialist and never vote for socialism. I don't deny that we have pieces of socialism.
Yeah.
But I do deny the revisionist history that says that FDR was a socialist or Obama was a socialist. FDR ran away from the term socialist. People called what he did socialism, and what he was doing was pieces of socialism. The New Deal was a socialist program. But he wasn't proud. He wasn't on the pulpit talking about how he was a socialist.
Right.
And Obama, as we all know, certainly ran away from that term at 1,000 miles an hour. And if he didn't, he would have lost. So people need to kind of like rein those things in. But what I'm more curious about with you guys is, and our viewers out there who have, a lot of differing opinions depending on where they are and everything. Do you believe in the tenets of socialism? And do you think that those can work in the United States? And what I mean by that is, should we have the basic things that basic democratic socialist countries have, like in Scandinavia or England? Should the government give us all health care? Should they pay for college education? Should there be paid leave for women that have a baby? These are pieces of democratic socialism in Europe, for instance, that we don't have here at all. And I'm curious if you guys think that that's what Bernie Sanders would say is a right, or is it something that is not part of our capitalist republic? And I don't know if you guys have thought about it deeply or anything like that, but
I've thought about the healthcare issue very deeply. Now, I mean, I'm split on it. On the one hand, I'd love it if healthcare were socialized. I'd love it if the government just said, you know what, no more insurances. You're just going to go and we're going to tax you. We're going to tax you another 20% on your income tax, and guess what? That's going to go toward universal health, real universal healthcare, not this Obamacare bullshit where the only thing that Obamacare has really done, and to be fair, it's only been in existence for 2 years. The only thing it's really done is allowed anyone who wants to get healthcare, which is a step in the right direction. However, it's super expensive and the coverage sucks. But I would just from someone who, has a wife and I want to see her taken care of regardless of whether or not I'm on this earth, I would love just a basic necessity of something we could all agree on, is saying like, look, no matter what's happening in a person's life, no matter what their social status is or where they're at in the caste system or the class system, they can at least walk into a doctor and get medicine or get a treatment for something without having to worry about going bankrupt for that. Now that goes against all of my capitalist tendencies, because I would veer way more right when it comes to fiscal politics than I think most people would give me credit for. We own a business, we own a corporation, and a lot of the ways corporations are seen in this world, in this United States, are, we're demonized very much so for being capitalistic, and that's just the way it goes, because sometimes, guess what, capitalism does run amok. But the only thing college, I don't know. I don't really see. I don't see the concept of the higher education institutions being what they used to be, especially in this digital day and age where people can basically quit college, teach themselves everything they need to know to be a millionaire and go be a millionaire. I don't think they need to necessarily subsidize schooling, but as far as healthcare is concerned, it would be. There's just a part of me and I know it's kind of irrational. I know it goes against the system we have right now, and it'll probably never happen. But I'd love to see us mirror something like what Canada has, which I don't really know how. I don't know really hardcore details on how theirs works, but I do know that you get taxed a lot and you can walk in and everything's paid for, right?
Right, but it's not as, and it's true. Like, here's the thing: is I don't believe in complete political orthodoxy. I really don't. That's why I'm a Republican who believes in gay marriage, or I'm a Republican who believes in a woman's right to choose, because I think these things are congruent with liberty. And so I've often said that even though I'm fundamentally against socialist programs, like new socialist programs, like Medicare for all, for instance, which would be like universal healthcare for 320 million people, something that's not seen anywhere in the world on that scale. If I believed and trusted that our bureaucratic system could handle it,
yeah, that's the problem.
Then there's a different story. But who amongst us looks at the American government, the most inept piece of shit bureaucracy at the federal level that might ever have existed, that can't do anything right? Nothing. And we just want to hand more over to them. Yeah. That's the thing that scares me so much, is the federal government is inept and they're corrupt and they are greedy and they're insatiable and they want everything.
That's the problem with your example of asking us what we think about it or whatever. I haven't thought too much about it because I don't think they can pull it off. That's the whole thing with Bernie Sanders, right? If Bernie Sanders was up against Donald Trump or Cruz, right? It's the crazy one we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Cruz is like the really religious.
It's like, well, I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders out of that. You know what I mean? Like, in the same way, I understand that, like, I don't think, Trump's wall or, taking down Roe v. Wade and all these other things could happen on that side. I also don't think that Sanders would be able to come in and be like, all right, we're all socialists. This is how we're, you know what I mean? Like, there's parts of it that work and make sense. And, I would like to see enacted. Sure. I think coverage for all would be great. You know what I mean? If that was how it would. But the thing is, like, I think that's great. I know it won't happen and it won't work. And there's no way. And our infrastructure couldn't handle it. Every time we talk about these countries that do this, right, and how great it is, you're talking about a state. That is, that is like the population of one of our states doing this. Now times that, 50 or maybe like 38, seeing as how some that's spread out. And that's when it gets to just be like, there's no fucking way we could do it.
That's the frustrating thing about the whole thing, where it's like, Bernie Sanders will walk around and be like, well, Denmark does that. I'm like, Denmark has a population of New York City. So now let's back it up a little bit and figure out how does our bureaucracy that can barely do anything right, nothing. Like, and I'm not trying to be like over the top or hyperbolic in any way.
Like, government sucks.
Like, they're awful. And I don't think the function of the federal government itself is awful. I don't think that a government is awful. Our government is awful. And so, like, we have an IRS that just exists just to tax you. We have these we won't even audit like the way Congress spends money. They just give money away to anyone who wants it. They fill their coffers with pork barrel spending and just have these little pet projects and stuff. Like, we just throw money like it's nobody's business. Meanwhile, we passed $19 trillion in debt. Meanwhile, what Bernie Sanders is suggesting would basically double it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just don't have this notion in our minds of like, well, we want these things, and these things in an ideal world are great. It would be great to say, like, go to college, young man or young woman, and we'll pay for it. You have a terrible illness, the government will take care of you, and all this kind of stuff. But where does the money come from? And why do we trust that the federal government, that can't do anything, is now going to suddenly take control of 1/6 of our economy, and more than it already has control of, which is an enormous amount of the economy already, and do it right? I don't know. It's just
no, there's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt. That's the problem, is that, like, again, it's always that constant struggle about the world you want to live in versus the reality of the world you live in currently. Like, I'd love nothing more to live in a world where the idea of just going to see the doctor was, like, not terrifying to me, And I don't mean terrifying that I might have something bad, terrifying that, like, I'm going to go see a doctor who's got way too many fucking patients and is so scared to render an opinion on what's going on because he doesn't want to get sued, that he basically just kind of prescribes whatever the fucking antibiotic is of the day, and that's it, right? You take this, I think it'll probably go away, but, don't come back. Is always kind of what you get. I would love to see that system change. I would love to be able to actually spend a half hour with my doctor, talk about nutrition, talk about what I exercise, talk about all these things that I know my doctor knows about because he fucking went to med school and they studied that there, but he's not going to do that. When's the last time you spent more than 5 minutes with the doctor?
Yeah, it's rare.
It's rare, and that is the end symptom of this cancer that is healthcare in this country. It's just doctors aren't empowered to actually take care of their patients, and they couldn't even if they wanted to most of the time because you probably don't have the right insurance for it. Also, you pay a shit ton of money in insurance, and the idea of insurance in general is a flawed concept, right? Because it's basically gambling. Yeah, it's gambling that there won't be some gigantic natural disaster or fucking plague that sweeps over the country that just, puts half the people in hospitals, in which case insurance companies will go broke like that. It just wouldn't, it's completely absurd. So that system in general is just kind of like it's yet another example of like why our country is kind of fucked, in that we all believe in this idea of health insurance when in reality, all it would take is one big natural disaster to potentially turn that fucking entire system on its head. And that would be bad, but we all pay into it every month. Hoping to God nothing gets sick. And the sad part is when it comes to healthcare, what most people will tell you, what most insurance brokers will tell you, what anyone will tell you is don't get sick. That's your only way to not get fucked by the system unless you're a millionaire. And that sucks. That's the way it goes.
What do you think, Tim?
I think this is all ideals, and I think that it's good things to strive towards. And what we're all saying is right, where it's like, all right, this shit's not going to happen, and that there's no way to actually make it happen. I think it's good to at least look towards that, though, instead of running away just because it's broken. And like, I definitely do not know the intricacies of all this shit at all. But like something like Bernie Sanders, to me, I'm like, all right, at least he's standing for something. It's like, it's crazy and it's not going to work, but like, at least there is a vision, and it's a good vision. It's a good thing. He's crazy for it. Like, from what I hear from you, he's crazy because there's no way to actually make that vision work, and it's just talking out of his ass. But like, I like what he's saying out of his ass. I think those are good things, and I think that putting that, people voting for him, if he were to win, I think that's a statement. And what does that statement
It certainly
mean?
is a statement.
I don't know.
Obama was a statement too. And I think.
But I think that it's good, at least in my opinion. I think it's a good thing because then, with the House and the Senate and all this other stuff, like, he's fucked. He's not going to get anything done because of, where they all lean and all their political games and shit like that. But I mean, it is a statement in a very good way that the top guy believes in this shit.
Yeah.
And that I think inspires a lot of other people. And Greg always talks about this in, terms of video games and all that stuff. But like, eventually the old people that made the rules are going to die.
Yeah.
And I think that putting someone like Bernie Sanders as president sets a standard that people growing up are going to look at and think, oh, those are the ideals. This guy's telling me that I should want these things and I should believe that they're my right. And I think that's a good thing because that's going to, the next, maybe not this generation, maybe not next generation, but at some point there'll be people that grew up hearing that these are options, that you could get healthcare and you don't need to worry about all this stuff. Like, I'd fucking love that. But I don't know. I understand that that's not the reality we live in, but that also, to me, doesn't make me want to give up and put someone else there that's just going to keep things going the same way, or take them in a slightly different direction that's also not going to change anything.
Sure. That was really good. That was the first time I've cared. I was like, oh, that's a really good point of how this all works. Cause like, I feel like that was the thing with Obama, that Obama got elected twice on the, hope and this and change. Like this, I'm a young president and things will be different. And then it's all the fucking same.
Yeah.
That's when I really am like, it just doesn't matter.
But I still
it really
think
doesn't
that,
matter who's in office.
And again, like, not that this really means anything, but like Obama, to people that don't understand, I'm talking about people that are not that are not people that are reading about politics constantly, that are only like, I don't know what the fucking Iowa caucus was until last night when I read about it. But I mean, honestly,
like a coin toss.
Here's my thing, all that stuff.
Weird.
But here's my thing: is it's like, this is by far the first election that I am actually educated on, and I'm not the most educated, but this show has inspired me to understand what's going on and to want to know what these things are. And I think that that's good because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that want to impress you in the same way I do. You know what I mean? And
just a lot of them hate me too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Politics. But again, those are the people that already know the politics. I'm talking about, I think that it's a good thing, and the more that people are like, oh, this is important, and I do have a say and whatever. And even if your say doesn't fucking matter because you're just some kid, and that's kind of my point here is like the Obama thing. So many of my friends, oh my God, hearing them talk about politics, I'm like, stop. Like, you don't know shit. I know you don't know shit because you don't read this stuff. You don't actually know this stuff. You hear something, you heard something from someone else that said something to this person. And like, you're just kind of regurgitating information. But at the end of the day, they believe that Obama's a good thing and that there is hope and that there's this and that there's change and there's all this stuff. It's a good message. And I'm happy that they believe that things could change. So I'd rather that than just everyone be like, well, we're fucked, so whatever. Let's just keep going this direction.
And that's true in the sense that it's the apathy that really kills me. We've talked about those Citizens United, which is like a thing that Bernie Sanders talks about a lot, which is like, corporations infusing money into into campaigns and basically buying elections and stuff like that, which is possible. But I think the only reason it matters is because no one fucking pays attention. Like if the people, and that's really kind of, that's the ironic kind of contradiction in one of Bernie Sanders' arguments, which is like, on one hand, he's like, the businesses and the banks are buying the elections, and this is an oligarchy in the United States. We're not a democracy. We're never a democracy, but we're not a republic anymore. We're an oligarchy, and like we're losing our control to the rich people. And I'm like, and he's like, so we have to be revolutionary and get on the streets and stuff like that. And I'm like, but that only happened because no one cares.
Right.
You know, like that.
Right.
And that's like, it doesn't matter. Like Walmart could put $100 million in an election, but if you're paying attention and you know they're doing it because it's fucking public, they can't hide it, you know, then you know, like, well, Walmart's in on this and this is like terrible. And so you vote against their interest if you care that much. But the fact is that no one cares this much, you know, or few people do. What was it in 2012? Like 100 million people voted or something like that. And we have 320 million people. Not that many of them are not eligible, of course.
Sure.
But like, you know, because they're children,
right.
Or they're, you know, not citizens or they're here illegally or whatever it is. But we probably could have gotten double that many people voted if they were just engaged. You know, I voted for Barack Obama in 2008, and the only time I ever voted for a Democrat because I really did believe in his message of post-partisanship and his message of hope and change, and he was going to change things. That like this gridlock. You know, you have to remember that in the mid 2000s, the Republicans were in a really bad place, way worse than we are now in terms of like we were in the wilderness, man, in a way that like we hadn't been in a long time with the war in Iraq, with Bush, a lot of controversy about what happened in Ohio in 2004 with the election and all this shit. Like we were in bad shape and we lost the House and the Senate, and this man came out and you know it said like we're put a hand down and like we're not going to like shit on you anymore. Like we can all work together, but he lied, you know, and it made things like more partisan, and it made things like way more partisan to the point where it's not been like this in the country for a really long time.
Do you think it's a lie? And this is always the question that I have when I watch people make bold-faced promises that, you know, they don't actually have the means of, or it's not even economically viable for them to keep. Do you think it's a lie? Like a bold-faced lie, or do you think that is their best intention and they want to go in doing that, and then the reality of the office is that they really can't affect change because of the way the Senate and Congress is set up?
Perhaps, but there's two answers to that question. A, the executive is not supposed to have all the power. The House and the Senate are supposed to be the seat of power in the United States. That's the idea of the republic. It's a representative republic. So like the executive's not supposed to just go in and be like, well, this is what I want. This is the problem with Bernie Sanders. Like the House is just going to laugh at him. You know,
the House being largely Republican, right?
The House is Republican, more Republican than it's been in 100 years almost.
Right.
So like they're gonna walk in and he's gonna be like, well, now we're gonna have Medicare for all, and they're like, no, we're not. You know, like, and
we just barely got Obamacare pushed through.
That was my point. Is like Obamacare is like 5% of universal health care, and like that passed by like 1 or 2 votes, and the fucking Democrats controlled both the Senate and the House at that time. That's what everyone seems to forget. Like it was all Democrat, and they could barely pass it. And like, so I look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, you know, to Tim's point, where it's like, well, let's not retreat to these bold ideas. And that's the way I felt when I supported Ron Paul and all that kind of stuff back in the day. But like, I do believe in a more pragmatic solution now, where it's like, well, let's have like incremental changes. What I was talking about on a conversation with Colin during our stream, where I was like, well, we can have these two extremes. We can have like crazy Trump, we can have crazy Sanders, or like we can, you know, I don't like Hillary Clinton, but she can at least probably get things done.
She can get things done.
And so too could maybe Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush or something like that.
If she can stay out of federal prison.
Yeah, which who knows what's going on.
We'll see.
So like,
you got to love that you can actually legitimately say that about a presidential candidate. That she's actually being like investigated by the FBI.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What kind of fucked up system do we have?
And that's what I've said before, and I'll say it again. Like this, the distressing part about it is that this is the best and brightest we have, and it's awful. Like on both sides.
Yeah,
like none of the candidates out there. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
Do you think that is a problem that we can ever change? I mean, is that the way we actually elect a president seems like such a ridiculously archaic process these days, right?
In what
with
way?
The Electoral College and with the way that
I mean, feel like you're stumbling into another topic here.
Potentially, but I just feel like people like Bernie Sanders. Well, all right, you're right. We are stumbling. You know what? We're stumbling into a crazy.
Let's put a button on socialism, and then we can. You can do that as a topic. We can move
that's a topic perhaps for another day, because this is not the last time we talk about politics.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it many times to the 2016 election. I'll just say this.
Yeah,
like I respect Bernie Sanders in a very deep way, actually, in the sense that he is an ideologue through and through, but he really does believe what he says, and he's always said it. And it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, like I don't agree with anything that comes out of his mouth, but he's consistent. He really doesn't change his tune on very much, and I do respect that. And I respect the idea of socialism, like a utopian kind of idea that we can all take care of each other and everything's going to work out fine. We're going to have enough money and everyone's going to create. But the reality of the situation is that the biggest economic engine in the world happened in a very stripped down republic that preached capitalism, that created the greatest wealth the world has ever seen, with only 4% of the population right now, and that much of what the world consumes in terms of entertainment, in terms of technology, in terms of medicine, in terms of all these things, comes from this country. And it's not to say other countries aren't doing things that are different or wrong. It's what my big fear, though, is that we trifle with it too much, or we fuck with it too much, and we ruin it, you know? And there's some special energy in this country in terms of the way it works that does encourage entrepreneurship. It does encourage risk taking and making great things and working really hard to get what you want, and you might lose or you might win.
Right.
But it also encourages a wealth gap, and it encourages a sixth of the population being, you know, at poverty, basically. It encourages all these bad things that we have to try to rectify too. And I don't look at those things and think those things are positive. All I'm trying to say is we probably shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That like something about this place works, and we often ignore the economic reality of that. That like a poor person, you know, in the United States that makes $30,000 a year or whatever, considered, you know, an impoverished person, would be rich in much of the world.
Right.
You know, would be beyond rich in much of the emerging world. And that we have different contexts for the things that are going on in our country, because we do have what seems like a growing oligarchy, which I wouldn't disagree with, and you know, a lot of money placed within a very few hands and stuff like that. And that's a problem. There's no doubt about that. But like, can we solve it without blowing the entire system up? The system that gave us and the world so much, you know? And it's not like an American pride kind of thing. It's more like, hey guys, like, let's just look at the reality of what happened in this country over the last 200 years, you know? And it's unlike anything that's happened anywhere in the world. And there's a reason.
But this is my question for you. Do you feel like the socialist aspect is why Bernie Sanders is so popular? Or do you, maybe looking at the two most popular, most talked about candidates, feel like maybe the power lies in the fact that they're actually come off as honest?
Yeah,
like,
well, that's why people like Donald Trump.
But that's my thing, is right, when you look at Trump, there's no rhyme or reason for why that person should be. Didn't he poll like 23% or something like at the caucus?
In Iowa, yeah. Out of like 15 people.
That's absurd. Like, that is absurd that man is still that popular, right?
In an evangelical state, he's gonna win New Hampshire.
This is nuts, right? So you've got this kind of far right, ridiculous. Well, he's not even far right. I don't know how. Yeah, he's a moderate. So you've got this kind of crazy, outspoken moderate sitting for the Republican side, and then you've got this socialist, like as far left as you could possibly go
in American politics.
In American politics, on the Democratic side, and those are the two people that are most talked about. That's crazy to me, right? But I don't think that's necessarily because he's a socialist. I really do believe that in this day and age where I think people can see through bullshit more than anything ever. And those that are paying attention can look at someone like Ted Cruz and be like, this dude, Jesus Christ, he is fucking pandering to the base, like left and right.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that, I know we want to wrap up, but I just think I want to leave it in two places. A, like, I understand that this is confusing to a lot of people in the rest of the world. And I get in the conversations, a lot of people are mad at me all the time when I speak out about it. It's just that, like, we in the United States, typically, like, socialism and the socialist ideology is just not part of our culture. And we have like little pieces of it, and that's fine. And what I want to see happen is the marketplace of ideas come up with the winner. Not like, and that's what goes back to the image in the beginning. Like, a lot of that shit's made up. That shit's not socialism. And like, if you want to like have an argument about what socialism does in the United States and what socialism can do in the United States, let's have an honest argument about it. But let's not circulate items that say the CIA is a socialist program. I mean, that's fucking absurd.
It's kind of the opposite.
That that makes literally no sense, and it actually hurts your argument. And one of the things that I really,
or NASA, for instance,
NASA
which doesn't have any real social.
Just because the government's funneling money into science doesn't mean it's socialism.
Right.
So we just aren't allowed to make up definitions to words. That's just not the way words work. Mm-hmm. You know. And I was actually really heartened to see even the people like the socialist people that were or the liberal people that were tweeting these things out. People in the comments were being like, "You're hurting us by doing this because like you make us look like, you know, it's like cartoonish to suggest that streetlights are socialism. You know, like that's just, that doesn't make any sense.
Base infrastructure.
But I want to say that I believe that I love the utopian ideal and I appreciate the socialist ideal. I just can't believe that we would want to take this federal government that does everything wrong and just give them more money and more power and more control and just be like, well, with more money, more power, more control, surely you'll figure it out. You don't have enough money. We only give you $4 trillion a year. You know, you already take a third of what everyone owns. We'll give you half of what we own. And then certainly it'll be fine now. And I think what you're going to see is a bloated bureaucracy that's even bigger and worse than it ever has been. And it's going to crumble, you know, under its own weight. And what we really should be doing is saying, like, what can we do to lessen the governmental burden on our lives, in my opinion, and democratize the idea of wealth and democratize the idea of entrepreneurship and opportunity and stuff like that. But I also want to say that the one thing I respect out of Bernie Sanders and his people very much is that at least they're engaged. And I've been saying this over and over again. Like, you can say what you want about these things, and we do get in our political disagreements, but at least you're engaged, and that's what I appreciate. If that's your candidate, go for it, and we'll let the marketplace of ideas sort this all out, and it will, one way or the other. I'm confident that my side will prevail in that battle of ideas. But if it doesn't, then I lost. Like we weren't eloquent enough. Our ideas maybe are just not in tune with 21st century America anymore and stuff like that. But I just get concerned with not the utopian ideal of socialism, but the practical application of socialism in the United States. We are not a country of 10 million people. We are not a country of 50 million people or 35 million people like in Canada. We are a country of 320 million people and growing exponentially. And there's no example in the world, in the history of the world, of having a Denmark style or a Scandinavian style socialism at that scale anywhere. And in those big countries like China, for instance, that are more communist, they have a massive wealth disparity problem too. It's not like the idea of socialism
aren't they capitalists now?
They are, but the point I'm trying to make is like they have. It's not like socialism just cures things. Sure. There's plenty of examples in Central and South America, in Eastern Asia, of socialist and communist countries crumbling under their own weight, and it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So it is a marriage of this utopian ideal with pragmatic political solutions that I think is the solution. And if some of these socialist ideas are jive with the American public, then so be it. But let's not just pretend that everything we do is socialist, and let's not also pretend that like the capitalist ideals and the individualistic ideas that we have in the United States haven't worked. They've worked wonders for us in this country, and they worked wonders for the world as well. So that's kind of where I want to leave it. But I wanted to see. I'd never really talked to you guys about that. So, and I'm sure our audience will give me an earful about it all as well.
So capitalism is good.
Greed is good.
What is the saying? I'm not nailing it right. It's like capitalism is the most perfect of all imperfect solutions or something like that.
Yeah.
Like capitalism for capitalism to win, it has to have losers. Like that's the problem. That's the negative.
That's what a lot of people don't want to see, right? Everyone wants equality in that regard. And the problem I've always had with that is, while it's a beautiful notion, and you're right, we should strive toward that, I just don't think it plays into the basic human tendencies, which is that greed is a tendency. The striving toward a better life is always going to be a tendency for people. And when you have a system that plays into that, you get great results, but you also get some horrible disparities.
Speaking of capitalism, Greg Way, this episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Building a website can be tough, and even if you do know your way around coding, creating something that looks good and works well, it's a time-consuming affair. Whether it's for your business site, a portfolio, a restaurant, or whatever else in this day and age, you probably need a website anyway. Well, lucky for us, Squarespace makes it easy to build beautiful websites without breaking a sweat. Squarespace provides simple, powerful, and beautiful website tools that look professionally designed regardless of skill level, no coding required. Not only does Squarespace provide you with intuitive and easy-to-use tools to create your website with, Squarespace also has state-of-the-art technology powering your site to ensure security and stability. And you can trust in Squarespace for your website needs when millions of people and some of the most respected brands in the world trust them too, including us. We built the original kindoffunny.com with Squarespace. Seriously. You can't beat the ease and simplicity of Squarespace. Squarespace gives you 24/7 online support and a beautiful website. So what are you waiting for? Start a trial with no credit card required and start building your website today. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code KINDOFFUNNY to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for us. Kinda funny. Squarespace. You should.
Build it beautiful.